thing he does to get us on YouTube.
I get nervous.
Thank you to everyone joining us here today in person as well as online. My name's Tessa Shevlin. I am the Business Development Manager for Dunlap Bennett and Ludwig. DBL is a veteran-owned and operated business law firm. We have over 80 attorneys who are licensed to practice in over 40 states, as well as multiple countries outside of the United States. We pride ourselves on caring for our clients, not only by offering a full array of business and estate legal services, but more importantly, by establishing and investing in relationships with the businesses and individuals which we represent, which is why we're here today. I'm very excited to introduce two of our partners, Cherylyn, as well as Dominique, and our two wonderful guest speakers, Kathryn and Jackie. Today, we want to have a conversation about preparing for the future, specifically how women can prepare both legally and financially to protect themselves, their families, their businesses, and often all three. I would like to start with Kathryn. Kathryn actually falls into all three of these categories. She is a business owner and about to be a mom. So, Kathryn, can you tell us a little bit more about your business and what information you have for us today on insurance?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction. My name is Kathryn Ivey with Legacy Insurance Group. We are a full-service brokerage located in Sterling, and we specialize in auto, home, business, and life insurance. And we're licensed in Maryland, DC, Virginia, and West Virginia. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to speak to you all today about everything insurance related when it comes to planning for the future. So the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to make sure that you have your own life insurance policy in place. And this is going to be so important because a lot of people have the misconception that if they have their life insurance through work, that they're all set. However, the majority of employer-provided life insurance policies never pay out. And that's because the beneficiary has no idea how to actually claim that death benefit. Because unfortunately, their family member who had passed, they had never received a formal life insurance policy with information including things like their policy number or claims number. So that beneficiary, and most of the time the widow, is left unsure of whether there is a life insurance policy in place, how much they should be receiving, again, what that claims number or policy number is, and really just those specific details on how to claim that life insurance benefit. Also, when you have your life insurance solely through work, again, work is a good place to start. However, if you quit or retire from your job, you'll never see or hear about that life insurance policy ever again. So even if you do retire with your same workplace, it is very unlikely that that life insurance policy will follow you, which is why it's so important to make sure that you own your own life insurance policy. Also, you want to make sure, of course, when it comes to life insurance, that you are providing for your family properly. And when I say properly, what would happen to your family if the income that you earn stopped coming in today? What would happen if you died in a car accident today on your way home from work? Where would your family be left? How would the mortgage be paid? College expenses for the kids? How would final expenses be paid off? Unfortunately, funerals are very expensive. A bouquet of flowers alone can cost up to $500, and that's really the last thing that your family wants to be thinking about is how are the bills going to be paid after they've lost a loved one. So again, I would really suggest to make sure that you have either a whole life insurance policy in place, a term life insurance policy in place, or a combination of both. Now that whole life insurance policy will last you for the duration of your lifetime, so your beneficiary will be able to see the payout whenever it is your time to go. And that term life insurance policy, I would normally recommend either a 20 or a 30-year term. And that will last you for the next 20 or 30 years, just depending on your specific needs of your family. And again, that just goes back, you can always do that combination of both if that works best for you and your family. Another great policy that you want to have in place is going to be an umbrella policy. Now, the umbrella policy will essentially act as an umbrella on top of your underlying policies, which will normally include your auto and your homeowner's policies. So for the umbrella policy, this is going to be excess liability coverage. And the excess liability coverage, say for instance, in the result of an auto claim that may happen, if you or another listed driver on your policy are held liable for a car accident, and you're then responsible for the medical payments of the other vehicle's passengers, if your auto insurance liability limits are exhausted, then your umbrella policy will be able to step into place. So this is really just so important to make sure that your assets are being protected and that you don't have to pay anything out of pocket. So normally for that umbrella policy, I would recommend to have either a $1 or a $2 million policy, just depending on whichever is closest to your net. Again, to make sure that your finances are protected. And at this time, I will open the floor up for any questions from the panel.
When's the best time or the best age to get a life insurance policy? What would you recommend?
That's a great question. So the best time to get a life insurance policy would really be today. I mean, you are the youngest and the healthiest that you will ever be today. And there's really no reason to put it off. You'll qualify for the best coverages with the best rates today.
And then in terms of the umbrella policy, how much would that cost for somebody?
Yeah, that's another great question. So for the umbrella policy, again, we're recommending a $1 or $2 million policy of that excess liability coverage. It really only totals to anywhere from $100 or $200 annually. So it's really not out of pocket. It's really not too much, just pennies on the dollar, if you will. So it really makes sense to get that umbrella policy in place.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathryn. Does anyone else have a question?
So, Kathryn, I have a question about the umbrella policy.
Yes.
So a friend just told me 2 weeks ago that her dog bit another dog, and the other dog's leg had to be amputated. And the vet bills were quite extensive. And so she actually used her umbrella policy to cover the other dog's owner's veterinarian bills.
Wow.
Have you seen that before? I'm just
A
curious.
three-legged dog? Have you seen a three-legged dog before?
I have seen a three-legged dog before. However, that specific incident, I am very grateful that I have not personally come across that in any of my customers. Unfortunately, sometimes dog bites have happened. We have come across that, at which point, yes, the umbrella policy can still step into place.
Okay, that's why I was wondering, because the vet bills, I believe they were I think it was about $25,000.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
I thought I said, oh my goodness, that's a perfect question to ask. Kathryn.
Yes, absolutely.
And how an umbrella policy came in very, very handy.
Absolutely, yes. I would highly recommend to have that umbrella policy. Just another reason to make sure that your assets are being protected.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kathryn. Cherylyn, does anyone else have questions before we move on? Yeah, we can go ahead and take a question.
So what is the best way to protect myself from being injured by an uninsured motorist?
That is a great question. So to protect yourself from the uninsured motorist, you really want to take a look first at your auto insurance policy and make sure that you have adequate coverage there. Our agency specifically, we do not even write business for state minimums just because we don't think that that's protecting you or anybody adequately, especially in this area. So we would normally look at those limits first. And I would recommend to have at least 100,000, 300,000 limits. And normally, I would always recommend to have a $250,000, $500,000 policy for that auto insurance specifically. And then from there, make sure that you do have that umbrella policy on top.
Yes.
What's your advice for business owners for umbrellas? 'Cause, like, I have auto for the business and then business owners insurance. Am I supposed to have an umbrella?
That's another great question. So when it comes to businesses, I would also highly recommend to have that umbrella policy in place, because although you do have that business owner's policy, which is great, that's of course a great place to start. However, you do want to make sure that if unfortunately a liability claim did happen and it were that significant, that you do have that umbrella policy to come into place, so that your business wouldn't be then responsible for the remaining payments.
Go right ahead.
If I want to buy the umbrella policy, do I have to go with the same insurance company?
That's a great question as well. So if you want an umbrella policy, do you need to stay with your existing insurance agency? Normally you do, because you want that umbrella policy to go on top of those underlying policies. So you want that umbrella policy on top of your auto and your homeowners. So I would normally recommend to keep the umbrella policy with that exact same company that you're currently with.
But I checked, I asked for a quote. It's more than what you reference.
Oh, well, I will give you one of my business cards after this. Certainly reach out.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit to, we've got some younger and medium-aged people here, in terms of the life insurance policy, which is what you started off with, because I'm just curious, your perspective on what you're seeing, to encourage people. I think when you're young, you think nothing's going to happen, you're never going to get sick, and then you reach 50 and things start happening that you may not have expected to happen, and then you're almost priced out of the insurance. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So this is another fantastic question. So when it comes to life insurance specifically, and actually I spoke with somebody very recently who is in their young 20s, and he was saying very similar things, asking, well, why do I need the life insurance policy now? Shouldn't I wait until I buy a house? Shouldn't I wait until I have children? The answer really goes back to what you had just said. You really want to make sure that you get that life insurance policy in place as soon as possible, because again, you are the healthiest that you'll ever be today. You're the youngest that you'll ever be today also. So you really are going to qualify for the best coverages with the best rates as well. Because like you said, once you do reach 50, even 40, it really just depends, and you just don't know what tomorrow brings. And you really want to make sure that your beneficiaries, who you're leaving behind, will be protected. Yes.
If someone is being priced out of life insurance options because they're overweight or they're a smoker, can they buy life insurance, and then if they change their health habits, re-qualify for a better rate down the road?
Great question.
That is a great question, yes. So if you, say for instance, if you don't necessarily have the best health habits at the moment, so if that does include using tobacco, or if you are more considered overweight, or even have high cholesterol, you can certainly retest after 12 months, and then we can certainly reevaluate the coverages as well as the rates.
Along that line, Kathryn, so how do you handle situations with people with chronic diseases? So we know that there's an epidemic of chronic diseases in this country. How about if you have MS or diabetes? I know that's very difficult for those individuals to get insured. Could you address that?
Absolutely. So for people who do have those chronic illnesses, unfortunately, I mean, that's something that we would still be able to cover. It would just normally allow them to fall into a different rating class.
I see.
That we would certainly be able to evaluate. And again, because we are a brokerage, it's really convenient for us as well as the customer, because we can actually shop around on your behalf and really make sure that you are getting the best coverages with those best rates.
So when you say rating class, does that mean it's going to be more expensive?
Normally.
More expensive. And will it be less coverage, or how does that?
It wouldn't
tweak it accordingly.
Right, exactly. So it wouldn't necessarily need to be less coverage by any means. We certainly want to make sure that all of our insureds are being insured properly and adequately, and making sure that their families are going to be financially stable
But definitely more expensive.
normally.
Okay, it's good to know.
Thank you so much. I want to go ahead and shift gears to Dominique. Dominique is a partner at DBL, as I mentioned earlier. She focuses on estate planning and probate. Dominique began her legal career crafting estate plans for first responders and law enforcement officers. Dominique, I'm looking forward to hearing your take on the sandwich generation today, which I guess is appropriate since we're all eating sandwiches. Individuals who are still guiding their young adult children, but also caring for aging parents. This is obviously a very stressful position to be in. What advice would you give to somebody that is in this situation?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming out today and attending our program. We really appreciate it. My name is Dominique Braggs, and I grew up in Arlington, Virginia. I am a divorced mother of 3, and I have 3 bonus babies. I am a graduate of the United States Military Academy with Courage We Soar. I was an Army finance officer, an engineer for GE, and finally, I've been an estate attorney for the last 16 years. And again, I'm so pleased that you were able to join us today. Happy early healthcare decision day. What is that, you ask? I'm glad you asked that question. Well, April 16th is designated as Healthcare Decision Day in Virginia. And that's the day that the Commonwealth has set aside for you to consider and review your healthcare plan. So it's critical that you have a plan in place that will let your medical team and your family know your wishes in case you are sick or injured and you can't communicate. Every person over the age of 18 needs to have a healthcare plan in place. Parents in the room, did you know that as soon as your child turns 18, you no longer have access to their medical records? You cannot speak to their medical team, and you cannot make decisions about their healthcare unless they have a healthcare plan in place and they've named you as their agent. So I just wanted to make sure that I made a note of that at the beginning of my remarks. And now I'll get into the sandwich generation. I love that term, although it's unfortunate when we look at it. If you're an adult with aging parents and you also have children, whether those children are very young or if they're young adults at this point, then estate planning is particularly important for you. After all, you are the glue that is holding together 3 generations. So starting with your children, you love and you care for these little miniature versions of yourself, and you want them to become strong, happy, healthy adults. That might not happen, though. You might not live long enough to see them grown and on their own. So there are a few things that you can do to take care of them, even if you're not here. First thing, nominate a guardian to care for them. So you can choose the person that you would like to raise your children if you're not around to do it yourself. Second thing, and I won't belabor this point because Kathryn did a fantastic job of addressing this, purchase life insurance to take care of them and to pay for their college. Create a trust for their benefit. Until they're 18, either their guardian or the court will look after their best interest and take care of them. But as soon as they are 18, they are on their own. Any assets that you left for them will be given to them. Do you really want to tempt an 18-year-old with a big check and no boundaries? That's the question. One way around this is to set up a trust and appoint a trusted advisor to guide them and provide stability until they are more mature. So your parents, you might be used to your parents taking care of you, but what happens when they need help taking care of themselves? Most adults move away from home and visit a few times a year. That could go on for several years or decades until one day you realize that your dad can no longer handle the car, or your mom gets confused when she goes to the store. At that point, you may discover that your roles are reversed and your parents need your help. So what steps can you take to assist them? Make sure that they have a power of attorney for healthcare and for finances. Make sure that they have someone that they can trust who can help them with their finances and their medical appointments. If they are experiencing a cognitive decline and they do not have power of attorney documents, then you may have to petition the courts to appoint a guardian or conservator who can make decisions regarding their health care, well-being, and finances. You want to help them achieve an appropriate level of care. So you might need to help them with round-the-clock nursing care, or even help them move into assisted living, if that's the case. Finally, you want to help them put together a care plan to ensure that they get the care they need, even if you're not there with them. And that's the reality that we're dealing with. We could be hours away from our parents. We could be on the other side of the country from them, and they still need care, and we still want to be able to assist them in every way possible. And finally, you, the meat in the sandwich, or the fixings in the sandwich. You're probably being pulled in many different directions. You are most likely still working, still paying a mortgage. You may be scheduling play dates, juggling medical appointments for everyone in your family. So what can you do to take care of you? First thing, complete your estate plan. Give yourself that peace of mind of knowing that you're doing everything you can to help your family in case you're not here. Prepare a will so that your assets can go to the people that you designate. Get life insurance so your family can replace your financial support. And while we're talking about replacing financial support, I also want to stress, you want to have life insurance for that parent that maybe stays at home with the children as well. Even though they're not outside of the home making a paycheck, they're definitely making a contribution. And if they're not there, you want to be able to afford to replace some of that care. Prepare a financial and healthcare power of attorney. So this is your chance to designate a trusted person to make decisions for you, and you want to tell them your wishes regarding healthcare and finances. Create a trust if needed. So trusts are normally created to assist in providing guidance and care for your children who are still under the age of 18. But you also might want to create a special needs trust if you know that one of your children will still need assistance after they turn 18 and may in fact need assistance for the rest of their lives. Talk to your family. Keep them informed so that they're in a position to represent your interest and take care of themselves if you're not around. So I also have a couple of frequently asked questions. I'm just going to go ahead and address these questions because I hear it from so many clients. They say, when's the best time to speak with my parents or my family? And my advisor is here in the room, and this is one of the things he likes saying, and so I'm stealing this from him. But we say, when is the best time to plant a tree? Well, the best time was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant it is now. Do it now. Second question. Will my parents think I'm trying to take their independence or their money? That's a concern. And the only thing that you can do is reassure them that you value their independence, that you love them, and you want to make sure that they're happy and healthy. Do not be afraid to talk about money. We shy away from that discussion in our society. We don't think it's polite to talk about money. But the reality is that money troubles can be a huge stressor. And it might help to know that your parents have concerns that they might outlive their money. Include your siblings in these discussions. You all want to do what's best for your family, for your parents, and you don't want to create family divisions that are caused by rivalries about things that happened years or decades ago. Keep that in mind, that you're doing what's best for your parents or for your children, and have those frank discussions. It might be a little bit uncomfortable right now, but it's so worthwhile in the long run. So now, if there are any other questions from anyone on the panel or anyone in the room.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Would you ask that when I take a bite? So all this is like hitting home right now for me. I'm not a sandwich because I don't have children, but my dad, my mom's been gone for like 5 or 6 years now, 7 years. And my dad has been struggling with health and blah, blah, blah. And recently, I mean, he's now has to do kidney dialysis. And so we're all like, my brother and I had a conversation about this the other day. He's doing like a power of attorney and all this other stuff. And I told him, I asked him, of course, like, I think we need to pull in an estate attorney, you know? So I'll circle back to him on that. But one of the things he did say is he needs to figure out how to get him on, because he's going to be, he's the organized guy in the family, right? And he is trying to figure out how to get on the deed of the house so it doesn't get probate or whatever.
Okay.
So, and I was like, that might be something that could be addressed somehow in the estate planning, right? Is that right? Or
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you asked that question, because that does become a major concern when people have property. They say, well, first of all, they hear the term probate and they immediately think horrible things. They think that it's a bad word. Probate is, at its most basic level, it's the process of retitling assets from an individual's name and being able to distribute them to their heirs or beneficiaries. So when we're discussing property, there are a few different things that you can do within your estate plan to make sure that property is transferred smoothly. You can, of course, set up a trust. You transfer the assets in the trust, and the assets then do not go through probate. Okay. You can prepare a transfer on death deed, which is a deed that's recorded before you pass away, that once you pass away, your family records a conforming deed that just says this property now belongs to these heirs. What you might want to consider, and I tell clients this all the time when they talk about adding their children to their deed or something like that, there are some pitfalls that are involved with that. Okay. If you were to add someone to your deed right now and then you pass away, they miss out on getting that step up in basis. So there are some tax consequences with that.
I'm confused. Explain that a little bit.
So for instance, if you bought property 20 years ago for $100,000 and the property is now worth $1.5 million, if you were to pass away today, your heirs would inherit that property at a basis or a value of $1.5 million.
They have the tax consequence.
Well, what happens is if they then turn around and sell the property, then if they were to sell it for $1.6 million, then the gain would only be $100,000 versus a gain of $1.5 million if they went from $100,000 in basis and selling it at $1.6 million.
Is there a way to avoid that?
There is. I'm glad you asked that question. there is a way to avoid that, but that's one of the reasons that you would want to have an estate advisor in the picture, because I've seen numerous clients that go ahead and put their children on the deed without realizing that there can be tax consequences. The other thing to consider is once you put their names on the deed, if you need to do anything such as refinancing the property or taking a reverse mortgage, well, you're not the only owner anymore. You need to have agreement from them in order to do anything with the property. And a lot of times people don't realize that this will be an issue. They're used to dealing with their assets on their own, and then they're surprised when maybe one of their children says, no, I don't think it's a good idea for you to refinance.
And John would be the one to say that.
So there are definitely considerations. There are ways that you can work within an estate plan to be able to do that, but there are considerations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you create a trust, what are some of the triggering events that would cause you to revisit, making changes to a trust?
Okay.
Or selling property, investments?
Well, Absolutely. So I'll start broadly with just the estate plan. We normally prepare an estate plan and we say this is not a static document. You should revisit it every 3 to 5 years or anytime you have a major life event. So when you get married, when you have children, if you get divorced, something along those lines, when you retire, take a look at it. And laws also change over time. So you might have prepared a document 20 years ago, but there have been numerous changes to the law since then. So you want to make sure that you address that. As far as your question about when you should update the trust outside of that time, if you purchase property and you want that property put in the trust, any sort of major financial moves, if you have a business or something like that and you want to consider it, give us a call. Come on in and talk to us. We can review it and see whether or not there are updates that need to be made.
2 questions. So first, thank you for addressing the over 18, you lose all control over your children and their medical. I think that's a really important piece of knowledge. I certainly didn't know that when my kids went away to school, and then heard horror stories of them being in car accidents and friends, and then mom calls the hospital and the hospital says, sorry, you're not power of attorney, you can't talk. So thank you for addressing that. I think, at least in my generation, you assume since they're on your insurance, you have control, and you do not. So thank you, Dominique, for talking about that. The second question is, can you give overall what your just top line advice is on a will versus estate plan? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, an estate plan is just for really wealthy people, and I'm okay with the will. And I personally know, people who have elderly parents, myself included, whose mom had things in a safe deposit box, and they only had a will, and then they couldn't get the stuff out of the safe deposit box because there was no estate plan. Can you talk about this from just a high level?
Absolutely. So the question that I hear most often is, what is an estate, and do I even have an estate? I don't have a lot of money. And my answer is, if you have a car, if you have a bank account, if you have any sort of property, you have an estate. It might not be very large, but you have an estate. And so you do want to have some sort of plan in place for how it would be distributed if you're not here. Whether or not you have a will, it's a great idea for everyone to have a will, just because these are your instructions for how you want things to be distributed. So it's definitely important to have that will. We sometimes also include a trust within our estate plan. And so even if we prepare a trust, we will also prepare a will that literally just pours into the trust to say, we have this trust. We meant to put our assets there. If we didn't, go ahead and give these to the trustee to put in the trust. I'm glad that you mentioned safe deposit boxes, because what people don't realize is if you are the only owner of that box, if you pass away, we can't just go to the bank and open that box. Yeah. No.
Wow.
No. We actually have to go to court and get a special order to be able to open a safe deposit box. So that if there are joint owners on the account, that takes care of that issue. But if there's only one owner on the account, it becomes very time consuming and very expensive to get into that box.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Susan, and I have so many questions, but I won't take up a lot of time. Especially from the safe deposit box. So is that a situation where you would have an executor set up on your will, and that person would be the joint person, let's say on the safe deposit box?
You could have that set up that way, or a lot of times it's spouses that are listed, or it might be a parent and a child, or even siblings that are listed on that box. The main thing, whenever you have joint ownership on an asset, and I'm glad that you mentioned this, because it's not just safe deposit boxes, also bank accounts. Parents are always talking about adding their children to their bank accounts. And I advise caution with that, because when someone is added as a joint owner, even if they didn't put funds into the account, they can take funds out of the account. So what we see in a lot of cases is, and instead of having a power of attorney, maybe that elderly parent just says, oh, I'll just add my daughter or my son to the account. And then they're a little surprised when that son or daughter takes out all of their money and spends it on vacations or something.
My next part is kind of a two-part question. So we're in a situation where we're due, and I will say Dave and Jackie, right? So we are just doing a lot of revamping and relooking at some of our finances. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is at what point would you want to put your home in a trust? I'm a mortgage lender, so I actually have a lot of my clients who have their home in a trust now. So I'm just trying to understand that process. Is it when you have a certain value of assets, or what are the benefits and what are the downfalls of potentially putting your home in a trust?
Well, I will say I'm glad that you asked that question about when you should put your home in a trust. And generally speaking, I mentioned one reason why you might have a trust if you have children under the age of 18. Another great reason for having a trust is if you have property in multiple jurisdictions. So if you owned a house in Virginia and maybe you owned another home in Florida, for instance, if you put the property in the trust, again, it doesn't go through probate. Versus if the properties are not in a trust and you pass away, probate will need to be opened in both Virginia and in Florida in order to dispose of that property. So that's another reason that sometimes people put assets in the trust. One of the things that I noticed, and I'm glad that you said that you were a mortgage broker, we would put assets, the homes, into a trust, and then that person would want to refinance. And in most situations, the mortgage company would say, it's fine, we don't have a problem with you refinancing it, but take it out of the trust first, refinance, and then put it back into the trust. Now, some companies are saying, no, you don't have to take that extra step as long as the trustees are saying that this is the property that can. Okay. Yeah. So to answer your question, as far as the pros and cons of putting it into a trust, again, assets in the trust bypass probate. So you don't have to worry about that. And again, if you only have one property and you don't have children, perhaps you really don't need to have a trust. But if you have created the trust, you should go ahead and take advantage of it.
Wonderful. Does anyone have another question for Dominique? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and shift gears to Jackie. Jackie, as Susan mentioned, is a financial advisor. She maintains state and federal licenses for life and health for Series 6, 26, and 63. Jackie, I know you're very passionate about helping women specifically prepare for the very real possibility of outliving their spouse. Can you talk to us a little bit today about how that might look for an individual?
Yes, thank you. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. We know, particularly for women, when it comes to estate planning, women live longer than men. Women live alone more often in retirement. And so being prepared for that, even if you're a couple, understanding that you need to be prepared to live on your own. The average age of a widow right now is 59 years old. And we know that 80% of the widows will lose their home in the first 12 months. And that is just because of a little bit of a lack of education and not being prepared appropriately for what it looks like for women as they move into that arena. Women are out of the workforce more often. Sandwich generation, they are caregivers, and we're seeing now caregivers of parents, caregivers of children, caregivers of grandchildren in some cases, and equates to about 12 years out of the workforce. And those are women who are losing opportunities in income and salary, and losing opportunities for matches on 401ks where their employers are doing those matches, and equates to almost $1 million over their lifetime.
Wow.
And so it's being prepared. Even if you're a spouse and you're a stay-at-home spouse, you can have spousal IRAs. You can have things set up in your name to prepare you. In life, what we're doing is we're managing two risks. Risk of dying too soon, that is your life insurance, and the risks of living too long or outliving your money. And so being prepared, as we start hearing estate plans, life insurance, all of these things, what happens is people want to pay down bills. They want to get their mortgages paid down, get their debts a little lower, put money into college funds for their children, but they're not taking care of themselves first. And what happens is you get to about 50 years old and realize, I don't have any retirement assets. I didn't plan for that. What I like to tell people with children is you can plan for college, but you can also borrow for college. You can't borrow for retirement. So you have to be prepared for what that is going to look like as you move in that direction. What kind of goals do you have? How much money do you need accumulated? Where's your income going to come from when you're 75 years old? You need consistent, steady, stable income that's going to outlive you. Used to be, we worked 9 to 5 to 65 and retired, and we had pensions, and those pensions took care of us for the rest of our life. The life expectancy was only about 68 years old. But with medical and health advances right now, we've got the fastest growing generations, the 80s and overs and 90s and olders. And so you're living 20, 30, 40 years in retirement now, and you need to have some assets built up so that you can maintain that lifestyle that you're looking for in retirement. How do you do that? Is just learning to balance all of these things that you're paying and always be paying yourself as you move through, even if it, take an 18-year-old, $50 a month, at least they've started something, and that compounding of interest that's going to happen is what's going to grow for them and take care of them as they move into retirement. What are you looking for, as you move towards retirement? Things do you have to think about? Medical expenses are going to be one of the largest expenses that you face in retirement, and we don't have pensions are on their way out. Pensions don't exist anymore in that format that it used to be. Even 401k matches are starting to go away. And so how and where do you position your money so that you can be prepared to create that income? We've got the first generation right now that are retiring that have had 401ks for their entire lives. And so people who have used that to their advantage and maybe amassed $1 million in their 401k or their TSP or their 403b, and the thought is, I'm just going to retire and I'm going to start drawing money out of that, and that's what I'm going to live off of. Well, that money still has to grow. It still has to be protected, and it still has to provide just this consistent income. So how do you create that? And it's just working through some of the financial concerns. I like to say, your perfect triangle when you're planning is your financial advisor, your CPA bookkeeper, and your estate planning attorney, because but with that triangle tied together, you can create a solid plan that you're looking for. And I want to touch on, again, beneficiaries are huge. So many people ignore beneficiaries on accounts, on retirement accounts, on life insurance, on houses, all of these things. What does all of that look like? You have to keep up to date. About 80% of the people that we speak to don't even have a will or any financial documents in place. But outside of that, they've got retirement accounts that maybe they've gotten divorced and their ex-spouse is still the beneficiary on these accounts. Those accounts are going to go to that beneficiary. So you need to, constantly be thinking about your beneficiaries on your accounts and updating those and talking to people. Blended families are now a very big piece of the world. And your will needs to be structured so that it accounts for, is your money really going where you think it's going to go? Because you've now got this blended family. And so it's taking just a whole approach to finance and just to asking questions and have someone answer those for you, and be open. If you've got a plan, let somebody else take a look at it that's outside of that. Go to another financial advisor and let them take a look at your plan. They may have the exact strategy you have, or they may say, you know what, these 8 things are good, but you're missing these 2, and I suggest you take a look. And so it's getting that evaluation that's very important. And I'm going to open that up. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jackie. Does anyone have questions for Jackie? Yes.
So with someone who has, personal property and everything, and your personal life, but then I also have a small business. So does the business have to have like a separate will or separate trust? Or you put it together?
That is kind of it depends. You have a business strategy and business accounts, and those are going to have different beneficiaries, different needs. They're going to go in different places. You may be a business owner that has a partner, and the assets to the business are going to go to the partner and not go to the family. You may be an individual business owner, and then the questions are, what do you want to leave? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to will it? Do you want to give it to your kids or to a charity? So those are all parts that tie in together to your personal.
So you have to have something in writing.
You do need always something in writing.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Jackie? Dave?
401ks. I mean, I know a lot of people change jobs today frequently. It's not the old 40 years working for the same company. What happens if somebody leaves a 401k with a former employer and they don't move that?
What's happening with the 401ks right now is they're getting lost. And people are leaving jobs and taking all of their possessions and their coats and maybe some Post-it notes and things they shouldn't be taking and pens, but they're forgetting about their 401ks. They often think they can continue to contribute to an old 401k. They can. Once you leave service, that 401k will land with the custodian. Often what happens is it shifts to another custodian over years. It will get moved from one place to another. And as it gets moved, you kind of lose track of where that is. It also will typically get moved into a money market position where it's really not making any money and fees are being eaten up by this account and disappear. So it's really critical that you know where your money is, but bring it forward. Have someone evaluate it. Is that the best place for it to stay, or does it need to be rolled into an individual IRA or someplace where it can work better for you and be more beneficial to you, and where you've got an accountability and know where that is?
Any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead and turn to Cherylyn.
Well, this has been so wonderful. You've just really summarized and really raised some wonderful points and questions. And my job is to wrap us up, and I know we're almost out of time, so I will do that. So I thought that this was a great panel for not only women, for business owners, but for everyone, for younger people, for the men in the audience, because it really just, I think, brings home the point that you really need to think about what is your objective, right? What's your personal situation? Are you a spouse? Do you have children? Do you have aging parents? Are you divorced? Do you have a blended family? Are you recently widowed? So you really need to think about what is, put your plan in place, right? Second, I want to talk about aging parents because we all have parents. That's one thing we all have in common. And they don't necessarily have to be aging, right? You can have parents that could be 40s and 50s and all of a sudden could develop some health issues. So I want to echo what already has been said. That's pretty important. Know where your parents' paperwork is located, right? Where is their estate plan? Where's their will? Now we know that there's safety deposit issues. Make sure that somebody has access to that information. It would be a good idea to visit go with your parents to their estate lawyer, to their banker, to their accountant, so that you can, so that those professionals know that you are engaged children and that you care about your parents and you want to know what their plans are. And it's just important to have those conversations. And then finally, have your plan in place, right? Mortality is an issue that none of us wants to think about. We don't want to think about it at 25. We certainly don't want to think about it at 65. But we know that that's coming, right? As they say, there's two things that will happen. You will have to pay taxes and you will in fact die. So it's great to have these very transparent conversations with your parents, with your siblings, right? As Debbie has pointed out, you and your siblings all need to be on the same page. All right. If you know that one of your parents wants to be cremated, okay, make sure that information is in the paperwork, because the parents may think, oh, we're going to have this great, open casket. Well, make sure that everybody knows what's expected and that you are all on the same page, because you want to have these conversations when people are healthy, they're lucid, before tragedy and before the unfortunate events take place. So with that, I think we're going to close out, and I hope we'll all stay and chat and network and continue to have lunch. And I thank you all for being here today.
Yes, thank you so much,
Thank
Cherylyn.
you.